Tens of millions of years ago, the earliest primate ancestors looked nothing like modern humans. They stayed small-bodied mammals, and their skin mostly worked the way mammal skin tended to work. It supported a thick coat of fur. That fur mattered because it held heat close to the body when temperatures dropped. For an animal that lost heat quickly, insulation meant survival. Under that fur, the skin still had to manage basic jobs: keep water in, keep germs out, and help the body stay near a safe temperature. But the main tool for temperature control stayed passive insulation. Sweat existed, but it played a limited role. Cooling happened more through shade, rest, and the simple fact that fur slowed heat loss when conditions turned colder. This baseline mattered because it set the starting rules. A fur-covered primate did not need a skin built for heavy, whole-body cooling. The coat already controlled the flow of heat, like a built-in blanket. The skin underneath stayed protected from sun and wind by that hair. It was a system designed for a small animal, not for long, hot effort. Over time, some of our ancestors spent less of their lives in the trees and more of it on the ground. The landscape changed around them. Forest broke into patches and the open spaces between them grew wider and hotter. Moving across that kind of country demanded longer walks and more work under direct sun. That shift sounded simple. It carried a new cost. Heat built up faster and there was less shade to hide in. On the ground, the body met the day in a different way. Air still felt hot, but sunlight added extra heat straight onto skin and fur. A thick coat helped at night and in cool mornings, but it turned into a problem once activity began. Muscles produced heat from the inside, the sun added heat from the outside, and the fur held it all close. The body faced the same basic threat every afternoon: overheating. In those conditions, stopping early meant losing food and falling behind. Staying active meant carrying a growing heat load for hours. Fur, built to trap warmth, now trapped too much of it. The longer the body moved, the worse it got, because heat did not clear away easily through a thick coat. This pressure did not come from one brutal moment. It came from repetition. Day after day, the heat demanded a solution. A new solution took shape inside the skin itself. Eccrine sweat glands expanded and spread across much more of the body. Instead of sweating only in small patches, the surface began to act like a cooling sheet. Heat no longer had to be carried away only by blood at the skin. It could leave directly in water. Sweat turned the body into its own heat pump. The trick depended on what happened next. Sweat cooled best when it evaporated, and evaporation needed moving air. When sweat stayed trapped, it stopped helping and it started wasting water. So this new system rewarded exposure. More skin open to airflow meant more heat escaped per drop. Cooling became less about resting in shade and more about keeping the surface working. That shift changed the rules of daytime effort. As activity heated the body, the skin responded fast, flooding the surface and shedding heat into the air. It gave our ancestors a way to keep going when other mammals had to slow down and pant. But it came with a cost. Heavy sweating demanded water, and it demanded skin that could actually meet the wind. Once sweating started doing the heavy lifting, thick body hair became a problem. Hair still helped at night and in shade, but during long activity, it acted like insulation wrapped around a heater. Sweat reached the hair first, not the air. It soaked, it clung, and it slowed evaporation. Cooling happened, but not fast enough. A gradual thinning of that coat changed the equation. With less dense hair, sweat spread across skin instead of getting trapped in a furry layer. Airflow reached the wet surface more easily, and evaporation pulled heat out faster. That simple physical shift mattered. It meant the body could dump heat while muscles kept working. The risk of overheating fell. The same daytime effort cost less water and less energy than it once did. As the insulating coat faded, movement in the heat changed with it. Longer walks and longer chases became possible without constant stops to recover. Activity shifted into hotter hours because cooling finally kept pace with exertion. Thick hair no longer set the limit. Skin did. And when sweating worked at full power, the landscape opened up as a place to travel, search, and persist. As thick body hair thinned, a new problem appeared. Skin that stayed shaded for most of the day suddenly sat out in full sun. Ultraviolet light hit harder, and it did damage fast. It broke down cells, inflamed tissue, and raised the risk of infection in tiny wounds. For a body already pushing its limits in heat, that extra stress mattered. A different kind of protection had to rise from within the skin itself. That protection came through pigment. Some individuals produced more eumelanin, the dark form of melanin that absorbed and scattered ultraviolet radiation before it could penetrate deeper. As generations passed, darker skin became more common where sun exposure stayed intense and constant. This was not decoration. It was shielding. It helped keep the skin working as a barrier, kept damage lower, and helped the body stay stable while sweating and moving under harsh daylight. With less hair, the rules changed. The same open skin that released heat so efficiently also needed a built-in filter against sunlight. Eumelanin provided that filter, and it did it every day without a pause. Darkening skin reduced the cost of living exposed, especially in the brightest regions where UV stayed high year-round. Hair loss made cooling possible at a new level. Increased pigmentation made that new exposed lifestyle safer. Dark, melanin-rich skin had protected naked, sweaty bodies under strong sun, but that solution carried a cost. Melanin also blocked some of the UV that the body used to start making vitamin D in the skin. As groups lived farther from the equator, daylight weakened and UV dropped. The old level of protection no longer matched the new risk. A different pressure began to matter. Vitamin D had helped the body absorb calcium and build strong bones, and it supported many basic systems. In low UV places, too much pigment could mean too little vitamin D. That shortage raised real stakes, especially for growing children and for pregnancy. Over many generations, people with slightly lighter skin often made vitamin D more easily. They left more surviving descendants. The balance shifted, slowly but steadily. The result was not a simple switch from dark to light. It was a moving compromise between two needs, shielding the skin from UV damage and letting in enough UV to fuel vitamin D. Where sunlight stayed intense, darker pigmentation still paid off. Where UV stayed weak for much of the year, lighter pigmentation became an advantage. Human skin tones spread into a spectrum that followed geography. As skin became more exposed and more active, it also became a bigger target. Tiny parasites could bite, burrow, and feed. Cuts could let bacteria in. Damp areas could turn into fungus. So the skin's job expanded from cooling and shielding from sunlight to policing an entire surface. It thickened where it needed to. It sealed faster. And it began to treat the outside world as a constant threat that had to be managed. Sweat did more than carry heat away. It washed the surface, diluted harmful chemicals, and made life harder for some microbes. Skin oils joined in, spreading a thin, greasy layer that slowed water loss and blocked certain invaders. Together, sweat and oil changed the rules on the skin, shifting moisture, salt, and acidity. That chemistry mattered. It decided which germs struggled, which survived, and how quickly irritation turned into infection. Then another ally took hold, the skin's own microbiome. Helpful bacteria lived on the surface and competed with dangerous ones, using space and food first and leaving fewer chances for troublemakers. The immune system learned to watch without overreacting, ready to strike when a wound opened or a parasite lingered. This was not perfect protection, but it was a stronger, faster first line of defense, one that made naked, sweaty skin safer to live in. Then a new kind of protection arrived, and it did not grow from the body. It was made. Skins got wrapped in hides and plant fibers. Wind and cold got blocked before they ever touched the surface. Simple shelters turned shade into something you could carry into new places. For the first time, survival depended less on what skin was, and more on what people put over it. Planned fire use pushed that change even further. Heat no longer had to come from fur or constant movement. It came from a controlled source, used at the right time in the right place. Warmth reduced the cost of bare skin in colder nights and seasons, and firelight extended activity past sunset when air cooled fast. Behavior started to smooth out the extremes the environment once imposed. That buffering altered natural selection. If clothing and shelter reduced sun exposure, skin pigments faced different pressures than before. If wraps and coverings prevented scrapes, bites, and frost damage, the body relied less on hair and thickened outer layers as first-line defenses. The biology still mattered, but it no longer worked alone. Culture became an added skin, one that changed what the real skin had to endure. When people began farming, skin stopped living in small, moving groups and started living in crowds. Fields tied families to one place. Villages grew into towns. With that came constant close contact, hands on shared tools, bodies in shared spaces, children clustered together. Skin met more skin, and infections that once burned out quickly now found fresh hosts over and over. Crowding turned minor rashes into spreading problems. Settled life also changed what travelled between humans and animals. Stored grain drew rodents. Barns kept livestock close. Waste built up near homes. Those new routines brought new bacteria, fungi, and parasites into daily skin contact. Small cuts from harvesting became entry points. Foot skin stayed damp in worked fields. Scabies, ringworm, and infected sores became easier to catch and harder to escape. The skin's defenses faced a new workload. Diet shifted too, and skin paid the price. Farming often meant fewer wild foods and less variety, especially in hard years. Missing nutrients showed up on the surface. Slow wound healing, fragile skin, and changes in hair and nails. At the same time, new exposures arrived. Rough fibers, plant saps, smoke from indoor fires, and harsh alkaline cleaners. Irritation became routine. Agriculture delivered stability, but it also made skin problems more common and more persistent. By the time humans spread across the planet, skin rarely stayed tied to one place. Populations moved, met, and mixed, and ancestry blended across continents. The old link between local sunlight and local skin tone weakened. In one city, people lived under the same sky with very different pigmentation, each body still built for a past that matched a different latitude. Modern life created a new mismatch, and it happened fast. Then daily habits changed the rules even more. Work shifted indoors. Travel happened in cars and planes. Climate control cooled and dried the air. Skin still sweated as if long walks under open sun had continued, but those conditions rarely arrived. At the same time, people sought sun on purpose, in short, intense bursts like vacations and weekend sports. The same ancient pigment system had to respond to a modern schedule it never evolved for. So humans built tools to manage what skin once handled alone. Sunscreens blocked UV that melanin used to absorb. Dermatology treated cancers, rashes, acne, infections, and pigment disorders that appeared under new exposures and longer lifespans. Yet the basic equipment stayed unchanged. Sweat glands still dumped heat, and pigmentation still tried to balance protection with vitamin D. The contrast stayed sharp, engineered living over bodies shaped for hot, open ground and naked working skin.